You're not part of the restructuring. It's being outsourced." She said it without looking up from her tablet. The words landed hard like a door slamming shut behind me. But I wasn't caught off guard. "My name is Michael Lang. I'm 57 years old. For nearly 2 decades, I was the one responsible for digital security at Summit Medical Center, a hospital tucked away in northern Ohio. I built the system from scratch, the one that protected every piece of data, every medical history, every quiet moment shared between doctor and patient. I never asked for recognition. I just wanted to do what was right in silence." Chelsea Monroe was 34, expensive blazer, a LinkedIn-certified MBA, and that kind of smile that says I've already won more than I'm here to listen. She came from Boston with a reputation as a modernizer. Took less than 3 meetings to make it clear. In her eyes, my time was up. She called me Lang, never Michael. Treated my reports like they were beneath her. When I flagged risks, she smiled and said, "You worry too much." But that Friday, my biggest concern wasn't getting let go. It was what I knew, and what she had no idea I'd kept. By Monday, my badge didn't work at the gate. The turnstile flashed red. No warning, no email. I had to wait for a security guard to buzz me in through the visitor entrance like 19 years could be reduced to an expired ID. When I reached my office, the computer screen greeted me with a cold message. "Access denied. Contact system administrator." I was the system administrator. Or I was until that Friday. I took a deep breath, grabbed my old ceramic mug with the hospital's original logo, the one from back when lab results were stamped and signed. As I packed my technical manuals and the little cactus that had survived all those years with me, I noticed something odd. The internal server was being migrated. Someone had triggered an automated wipe script. No one had told me. I walked over to the IT department, what was left of it. It was now split between an outsourced company and a few faces I barely recognized. No one looked me in the eye. One kid in a black t-shirt and a bright orange badge mumbled, "We're just following orders, sir." Sir. Funny how age suddenly matters when they want you gone. It felt like someone wanted to erase every trace I ever existed there. One of the new analysts, someone who didn't even know me, whispered in the hallway. They said to wipe everything before the auditors show up. I acted like I hadn't heard. But those words kept echoing. A few days before they let me go, I noticed something off in the overnight logs. Odd data requests, entire batches of clinical records, timestamps, diagnoses, prescriptions being accessed at strange hours by generic user profiles. I flagged it to Chelsea. She laughed. "You need a vacation, Lang. It's just automation." But I knew how to read patterns. This wasn't technical. It was deliberate. 2 months before the cut, I found out that a company called HealthBridge Analytics had been granted remote access to our database. The justification in the contract was performance and efficiency analysis, but their domain was registered to a co-working space in Phoenix, and the data was being routed to masked IP servers. I made copies, stored everything on an encrypted drive at home, right next to my marriage certificate and my daughter's graduation photo album. In the exit meeting, Chelsea didn't thank me for my years of service. She just repeated HR's lifeless script. "It's a strategic decision." When I brought up the suspicious data activity, she smiled that same sweet, poisonous smile she'd perfected. "Michael, you're seeing ghosts." And just like that, they handed me an envelope with my severance number, a number smaller than my old employee ID. As I walked toward the parking lot, I glanced up at the glass floors I'd spent nearly 2 decades protecting. I thought about every patient whose data had passed through my hands, kids with leukemia, veterans in physical therapy, mothers in labor. Their trust was invisible, but it was real, and now they were selling it, selling people. I started the engine, but didn't drive off, not out of shock, not even anger. I just sat there because in that quiet moment, something simple hit me. They didn't fire me, they erased me. But if they erased me, why were they in such a hurry to erase the evidence too? Sunday, I sat on the living room couch with the TV off. My coffee was cooling in my hand. Rebecca, my wife, walked quietly across the hallway. She already knew. Since she saw my face on Friday, she hadn't asked a single question. She just hung up my jacket and made dinner like it wasn't the end of an era. "You want to talk?" she asked, standing. I shook my head. Not yet. But that was a lie. I did want to talk. I just didn't know how to put into words something that made no sound, the weight of being overlooked, discarded, replaced by someone who never really understood what you did. I stared at the wall where our family photos hang. Rebecca at her master's graduation. Our daughter, Amy, smiling wide with braces years ago. I thought about how many nights I wasn't home because a server went down, or because Chelsea changed a process without telling anyone. Thought about the birthdays I traded for on-call shifts, the holidays I missed because of midnight updates, and now, just silence. Late that night, I went down to the basement, opened the old toolbox where I kept the flash drive hidden. The dim bulb swinging overhead cast shadows on my hands as I plugged it into my personal laptop. The password was long numbers, symbols, pieces only I would understand. It was a phrase from my daughter when she was 5. She once told someone I worked with robots that keep secrets. She wasn't that far off. I reviewed the files slowly. Logs, contracts, permissions, records of unauthorized access, all documented, all time-stamped, all digitally signed because I'd always known the day would come when someone would try to cover their tracks. And when that day came, I wouldn't be caught off guard. Rebecca came down the stairs quietly and paused at the doorway. You really thought it would last forever, didn't you? I looked at her. I thought integrity still meant something. She walked over and rested her hand on my shoulder. It still does, just not to them. I closed the laptop, but not the thoughts. I stared at the table for what felt like hours. For the first time, the pain I felt wasn't from being fired. It was from realizing something deeper. I was never part of that place. I just protected it. They used my silence as a crutch. But now, silence would be my weapon. And as I reviewed everything I'd saved, one question started circling in my mind. Maybe someone else saw it too. But if they did, why the silence? Monday morning I woke up at 6. Not because I had to, but because my body still thought it needed to check access logs before coffee. Rebecca was already in the kitchen. The smell of toasted bread pulled me back to those mornings she'd have breakfast ready before I headed into another long shift at the hospital. Only now, there was no shift, just silence. You gonna keep staring at the wall, she said, or are you gonna do something with what you know? She didn't say it harshly, just truthfully. I picked up the flash drive again, started reviewing things more carefully this time. Buried in the records, I found archived emails, internal messages from doctors flagging suspicious activity. One said, Michael, these third-party reports seem off. Think someone's pulling data without clearance? I had replied months ago. I'm keeping an eye on it. Thanks for the heads up. But in the chaos, I'd let it slide. Then one old message stopped me cold. It was from James Waters, an intern who'd worked with me 2 years earlier. Mr. Lang, I noticed unusual activity in the user permissions last night. Do you want me to file an alert? I'd replied, good catch, and handled it myself. But reading it now, something hit me. He'd seen it way too early. And after that day, no one ever asked him about it again. I also found a message from a father whose daughter was battling cancer. He thanked us for restoring her medical records after a system crash. You saved my daughter from a delayed diagnosis, he wrote. I stared at that sentence like it was a mirror. I decided to leave the house, went to the public library. I didn't want any of the searches traced back to my home, at least, not yet. I started digging into the companies that had access to our database. Turned out Healthbridge Analytics, the main player, was registered under a private equity fund that also had investments in health insurance companies. This wasn't just about data. It was about money, big money. And behind it, people with enough influence to make sure none of it ever saw the light of day, unless someone with hard evidence spoke up. I came back home with a notebook full of scribbles and a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't anger, it wasn't fear, it was clarity. At dinner, Rebecca looked me in the eye and asked, "Are you really going to go through with this?" I answered without raising my voice, "It's not about me. It's about the people who signed those consent forms, trusting we'd protect them." But something still gnawed at me. What if someone inside had tried to sound the alarm and got silenced before I did? I started with the contracts. There were 3 companies with authorized access to the hospital's database. 2 were legitimate, used for scheduling and CRM. The third, Healthbridge Analytics, had a masked IP that redirected to servers across multiple regions. I discovered their first access logs appeared just 3 days after Chelsea arrived. Too much of a coincidence. I spent days cross-referencing records, spreadsheets and metadata, time-stamped access logs, IP comparisons. It wasn't just technical, it was patience, something they never valued. They knew how to sell, but they didn't know how to protect. In the back of a closet, I found an old external hard drive, the kind only people who lived through the physical server era still remember how to set up. Inside were early versions of the system I built, backups I'd made out of habit, not suspicion. Now, they were ammunition. Buried in that drive was a detailed log of an access event from January, 2 a.m., using an account labeled admin04. That account had been deactivated by me in 2020. Someone had reactivated it and bypassed me completely. The IP? It matched the address of a co-working space in Phoenix, the same one tied to Healthbridge. That's when it hit me. They weren't just exploiting gaps. They were building tunnels, with inside permission. Chelsea didn't ignore my warnings by accident. She needed me to stop. She needed me gone. I built a dossier, detailed, visual, unignorable, every name, every date, every link, all organized into a dual encrypted PDF, one master file, 3 copies. One copy I sent to an old email account I'd set up years ago back when I was testing system vulnerabilities. The other 2? I gave them to an old friend from legal, someone who always knew how to tell the difference between loyalty and silence. Rebecca watched everything from a distance. At night, she'd ask, "Are you sure you want to go all the way with this?" I'd answer with another question. What if it were your data? Or Amy's? One Wednesday morning, I got a strange email. It was from a former intern of mine, Lang, hearing weird rumors. The new IT crew's wiping old files without notice. They say it's protocol. Do you think? I didn't reply, but I could feel it. Time was running out. On Thursday, I went to the bank, rented a safety deposit box, left one of the hard drives inside. Precaution. Rebecca thought it was overkill. I called it security. People who sell patient data don't have boundaries. They only have opportunities. When I got home, I called my old colleague from legal, gave him the broad strokes. He answered with one flat sentence. Send it. What you've got could take people down. I closed the laptop, wiped my traces. That night, I lay down with my head on Rebecca's chest. Sleep didn't come quickly, but when it did, it wasn't out of exhaustion. It was readiness. Just before I drifted off, one thought surfaced. What if I wasn't the only one who noticed? What if someone else inside tried to speak up and got silenced? It had been weeks since I last opened my LinkedIn. Couldn't even remember if my password still worked. But that morning, there was a pending notification, a direct message from a name I didn't recognize at first. Daryl Hernandez. You were the security guy at Summit Medical Center, right? Let me ask you something. How did my new insurance provider already know what antibiotics I took last year? I read the message twice, took a breath, and replied carefully. Can you explain that a little more, Daryl? His answer came in under a minute. The tone was sharp, suspicious, almost angry. Daryl said that after switching health plans, he got a phone call offering customized options based on his recent medical history, details he swore he'd never officially shared. At first, he thought it was a hospital mistake, maybe a leak, but then he received a letter, one that listed medications from a past hospital stay. One of them was experimental, part of a treatment he didn't even know had made it into his insurance records. Someone's selling this, aren't they? He wrote. I'm right, aren't I? In that moment, everything shifted. Up until then, it had been technical, ethical, cold, but now it was personal, real. These weren't just tables, logs, or generic contracts. These were people, being exploited, regular people, like me, like Rebecca, like Amy. I spent the rest of the day combing through the files I'd stored. I filtered data access records from the past 18 months and matched them against real patient profiles. Some names kept coming up: elderly cancer patients, kids with rare diseases, veterans in psychiatric care. Extremely sensitive information viewed and exported through internal accounts linked to Healthbridge. Chelsea's name appeared next to administrative authorizations. She didn't just know. She'd signed off, formally granting access to external partners for clinical performance. I called Rebecca into the room, showed her the logs. She stood there for a while in silence, then asked, Are you really going through with this? I just nodded. This isn't just about me anymore. I went back to LinkedIn and replied to Daryl, You're not wrong, but you'll need to be patient. If we do this the right way, we might be able to shut this down for good. If Daryl figured it out on his own, how many others had seen the signs and chosen silence? And why? Friday morning, I went to a print shop downtown and printed the dossier. 43 pages, detailed logs, access maps, contract copies, and the names of people who'd signed off on permissions that never should have existed. I didn't hand it to anyone, not yet. But holding that stack of paper in my hands, I realized something. Everything they'd always ignored was now speaking out loud. I went back home, sat on the porch, and scrolled through my contacts slowly. Stopped at the name Douglas Wyatt, former legal director at the hospital, retired 2 years ago, one of the few who ever treated me with real respect. I called. He picked up on the second ring. Lang? Thought you'd vanished. They tried, but I've still got a few things left. We met at a small cafe away from the city center. I brought the printed file and a flash drive with the full backup. Told him everything. No drama. He listened, asked brief questions, jotted down names. When I finished, he asked, "You want me to deliver this?" I shook my head. "No, I just want you to send it to the right place. No name, no noise." By Monday, the dossier had reached the hospital's board of directors. Anonymous, but impossible to ignore. The next day, 3 meetings were canceled without notice. Chelsea vanished from the hallways. Rumors started flying, something about unauthorized access to clinical data. Stephen, a tech still working there, sent me a message. "Lang, do you know anything? Something's off here. Chelsea's gone. And they said they're reviewing the external IT contracts." I didn't reply, but it was clear the wheels were turning. By Wednesday, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it ring through to voicemail. The voice was familiar. "Michael, this is David Croft, chairman of the board. We need to talk. Preferably today. It's serious." Thursday, 2 more calls. I ignored them all. It wasn't time to talk. Not yet. I went back to the bank, opened the deposit box, checked the backups. Everything was intact. The files were stored in 3 separate locations, 2 physical, 1 digital, encrypted and cloud-based. If anything happened, they were set to be released to regulatory agencies automatically. All it would take was 1 button. But this wasn't the time to blow anything up. Not yet. First, I wanted to see how they'd squirm on their own, not knowing where the pressure was coming from. Saturday night, I got another message. Short, quiet. "Chelsea's been removed. Board's reviewing access permissions. They're saying something big is coming." I set the phone down on the table and walked into the kitchen. Rebecca was chopping onions. "Someone important fall?" she asked. She started slipping. "The fall's still coming. And you gonna push?" "No. I just placed a mirror on the floor." She tripped on her own. Later that afternoon, Rebecca came back from the store. She set the bags on the counter, looked at me, and simply asked, "Did something happen?" "Maybe. Maybe the first domino just tipped over." She nodded quietly and went back to unpacking fruit, like someone who already understood everything before I even said a word. If she went down that fast, it means others were holding the strings. So who are they? Tuesday, 10:47 a.m. The landline rang. Yes, the landline. "Only people from the past still call that number," I answered calmly. The voice on the other end didn't waste time. "Michael, this is David Croft from the board. We've been trying to reach you for days." I waited. "We've received some very serious material. We're conducting an internal review. Chelsea's been placed on administrative leave. We need to talk." "About what?" "About how to make things right with you. The board and external auditors are aware partially of what's been submitted. We want to avoid a public escalation." Silence. He took a breath. "The hospital needs someone who knows the systems, someone with integrity, someone like you. We're prepared to create a new role, full autonomy, direct line to the board, chief consultant for digital security and ethics, double salary, your own team, a formal apology, if needed." I sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the window. The trees outside were starting to change color. Fall always reminded me of time, how everything shifts even when we feel stuck in place. "David, you know what your biggest mistake was?" He paused. "Letting you go? Believing Chelsea?" "No, it was thinking that ethics can be replaced." I told him firmly that I wouldn't be coming back, not out of pride, but because any place that throws you out in silence doesn't deserve to applaud you after the storm. I wasn't looking to return. I was looking for consequences. He tried to counter, offered more. "We could build a transparency unit in your name, Michael. Show the industry we made it right with the right person. I don't need my name on a plaque. I just need you to learn." Before hanging up, I gave him a name, Gabriel Waters, a former intern of mine. Young, ethical, sharp, the kind of person who still believes doing things right matters more than climbing fast. I trained this kid with everything I know. He doesn't know it all, but he knows enough not to sell out. David thanked me, but his voice had that weight. the kind people carry when they realize they're too late. From across the kitchen, Rebecca had heard everything. When I hung up, she asked, "You didn't even think about going back, did you?" I did. Back when I thought maybe they were just lost, but now I know. They knew exactly what they were doing. She came closer, rested her head on my shoulder. So what now? I looked at the flash drive on the table. Still there. The last solid reminder of everything they tried to bury. And I wondered if I had walked away quietly, without looking back, how many other stories would be getting sold right now, with no one watching. 2 months after that call, life at home found its rhythm again. The laptop was back on the dining table, but not to put out fires anymore. Now, it was to build something new. I started my own consultancy. Small, low profile, just the essentials. A name, a phone number, and a simple message on the site. Security that respects people. That was it. And for now it was enough. The first inquiries came slowly. A rural hospital wanting to audit user access. A mental health nonprofit with questions about compliance. Nothing big, but each one spoke to me the same way, with respect. Not like a tool, like someone who knew what he was doing and why. I was invited to give a guest lecture at a nearby tech college. I walked into the room in worn-out jeans and a button-up shirt, no tie. Looked at a crowd of young faces, all wide-eyed and eager. And I said, "Information security isn't about protecting machines. It's about protecting people, people who trust us without even knowing we're there." And in that moment I realized, maybe I was never meant to stand behind an employee badge. Maybe my place has always been where stories need protecting before they become just another statistic. That afternoon I got a message from Daryl. Short, simple. It stopped. No more calls, no more emails. Their lawyer says they've launched their own internal investigation now. "I don't know what you did, but thank you." I replied with just one sentence. "You're not data. You're a person. Don't ever forget that." Later that day, a plain envelope arrived by mail. No return address. Inside was a copy of the final board meeting minutes from Summit. Cold, clinical, but there it was in black and white. Former COO Chelsea Monroe has been terminated. New continuous audit policy approved unanimously. Immediate implementation. I closed the envelope and placed it in the drawer with the flash drive. Not out of fear, but for memory. Because what we don't remember, we repeat. The next day I got an email from Stephen. "Thanks for not letting it slide. Things feel different here now. They're listening more. And the new team seems like they're here to do it right." I smiled. You don't always get to see the fruit. Sometimes, just knowing it's growing is enough. Rebecca walked into the room, smiled, and asked if I wanted to go for a walk. I said yes. Grabbed my coat. On the way, she took my hand and said, "You seem lighter." "It's not lightness," I replied. "It's silence with purpose." As we walked, I thought about everything, the access logs, the cold meetings, Chelsea's eyes. That way she looked at people like she was walking through glass. But now all of that was behind me. And what was left, no one could erase. Have you ever had to protect something no one even knew was at risk? Have you ever felt that the silence you kept was the one thing that saved everyone?